I used to watch The Simpsons all the time, and the wife of the Reverend on the Simpsons, her response to any political question was, think about the children. Let's think about the children. And our whole society has slipped into that kind of Oedipal virtue. It's a reflexive infantile compassion. There's a presumption underneath that the manifestation of that compassion, which is appropriate for infants, is the only valid political response to every single question. And so you frighten people, and the good thinkers, the maternal good thinkers, think, oh, well, security and safety, protect the infants. And fair enough, because you've got to protect the infants, but we're not infants, or are we?
Do you think that's historically unprecedented? Are we more obsessed with...
Yes, definitely.
Why?
Well,
why is that?
why? Because of the large-scale movement of women into the political sphere. That's a huge part of it, because women are more agreeable than men. And so compassion for them is it's the easiest moral option that's available. And this is a real struggle, right? Because how much you should push forward bravely and how much you should secure the home front, that's a constant question. But we've had a mass movement of women into institutional and political arena. So that's one element of it that we haven't contended with at all, and no one will even ask the question. And then there's another issue that's relevant to this too, is that the female mode of antisocial behavior is reputation destruction. Like, males engage in physical conflict, but that isn't how, especially antisocial males, they'll use physical dominance as a means to obtain their narrow, self-interested goals. That's a bully, and bullies become criminals. That's not the female antisocial pathway. The female antisocial pathway is gossip, maliciousness, and reputation savaging. And there's a very well documented psychiatric literature looking at antisocial behavior in women. I'm not making this up out of whole cloth. The problem with that is it scales on social media.
In some sense, our COVID response is a gendered issue.
Yes. Well, you can see that in the attitudes. The only Canadians right now who support mandates full out are women over 55. And I think, well, they'll wonder, that's what a grandmother should do. Who could you possibly be to oppose that?
Evil.
What makes you so sure you're not a predator? Well,
I mean, you and I have both been called evil, so.
Yes. Well, and that is part of that feminine security response. Now, I'm not blaming women for this. This is a very complicated problem. But that which threatens the integrity of an infant is a predator. Now, the question is, what happens when that scales? Now, the psychoanalyst said, this is a Freudian idea, the good mother necessarily fails. That's exemplified by Michelangelo's Pieta. That's like a symbol of the female crucifixion. It's to offer your children to be broken by the world. And that's a major sacrifice on the part of women. It's a major, absolutely. But the alternative is to devour them, right? That's the Freudian nightmare. It's like, if you don't propel your children out to the world, so you're the supporter of the call to adventure, which is terrifying. It's terrifying. My daughter-in-law, she was with her son, Elliot, for 18 months. And then she went back to work, and she made arrangements with a woman who had a couple of little kids in daycare. And she brought Elliot to daycare and let him off. And he was ready for it. They'd prepared him for it. But he cried when she left, and she just left. She could have hovered on the boundary there and tortured him to death for like 3 hours, right? Because of the misery of losing her infant, because that's what that marked. And then she went home and cried. It's like, good for her. She went home and cried. That was the right thing to do, not to demonstrate her inability to let go of that maternal attachment when it was appropriate, which is really an act of transcendent heroism on the part of a mother. That's not that reflexive compassion that all too often is confused with moral virtue in our culture. The fact that you feel sorry for people does not mean that you're good.